Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's our host for this week, Russell Martin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I am your host, Russell Martin, and I am just wanting to let you know it's so glad to be here. I'm glad to be back doing this. I've taken a little while off of doing interviews, and so this is my first interview back in a while. And so if you are listening to this and you want to find out more about who we are and what we do, go check out studentministryconversations.org. In your favorite web browser. And on that page, you can find links to other episodes, to blog posts. You can find a link to our YouTube channel, which hosts most of our videos that we record. This one won't be up there because we had some technical difficulties, but this is Olivia. Also, we'd love to connect with you through social media. So at Talk Student Men is where we are found on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And we'd love to connect with you, message us, ask us any questions about any episodes or anything. We'd love to talk to you there, and we'd love for you to give us a shout out and tell your friends and other leaders about that as well. So today I'm excited because we get to hang out with Olivia Hewitt. And Olivia is somebody that I met through my time at Asbury Seminary in Memphis on the Memphis campus. And Olivia is the director of middle school ministry at Christ Church Memphis, Methodist Church there in Memphis. And so she's going to talk about middle school ministry. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the opportunities? But first, Olivia, before we do that, let's get to know you. So tell us a little more about Olivia. How'd you get to where you are, your journey in ministry, and just let us get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So hi, as he said, my name is Olivia Hewitt. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. This is where I grew up. I got married a year and a half ago to my husband, Jacob. He is a credit analyst at First Horizon, and he's a sheriff deputy on the weekends. So I have a dog named Ranger. He's in here with me, and he is 110 pounds of love. And we have a cat named Soup, who got his name from his cousin cat. His name is Sandwiches. And so it's Soup and Sandwiches, and I love my animals to death. So I went to MC, Mississippi College. It's a small Christian college in Clinton, Mississippi, and I majored in Christian studies. Knew I was supposed to go into ministry, but I wasn't really sure where in ministry. Kind of ended up just falling into youth ministry. I got offered a youth intern position at First Methodist Clinton and took it and was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but sure. I loved every single second of it, and I'm so thankful for it. And so after that, I interned at the church I'm at now for a summer internship, Christ Church Memphis, and they asked me to come back and let me go to seminary. And I was like, well, God, you're going to have to make it pretty clear if you want me to go to seminary, because I already graduated with a bachelor's in Christian studies. I had no plan of going back. And God said, you're funny, you're going to go again. And now I'm in seminary and I absolutely love it. And as you said, I'm the middle school director, so I deal with 6th to 8th graders all the time, and they're hilarious and I love them.
So I'll be honest, I love middle school ministry. It is one of my favorite groups to work with. As people who've listened to this podcast before know, during the pandemic, I switched from doing youth ministry to becoming a lead pastor at a church. But middle school by far was kind of my favorite group to work with. But it is a calling. It is kind of its own group, and it takes its own special kind of leader to do that. And so I want to start off with asking you, why is it that you love middle school ministry? I mean, what is it about them that makes you get up in the morning and love what you do? Just kind of tell us, why do you love middle school?
Yeah. this one, like, they're so funny. Like, I come home with a different story each week of just how crazy my middle school students are. Like, I have a list on my phone of all their quotes and just like the stupid things that they say, and they're hilarious. And like, no adult, other than like they parented a middle school student, but no adult really sees that side of them unless they work with them all the time. That they're so funny, and they genuinely like want to laugh. Like, I hear all about their church crushes. I hear all about their school drama, and like just how fun they are. But also I love all of their questions. In elementary school, they're still kind of taking what their parents told them and just automatically believing it. In middle school is the time when they're starting to question that and be like, okay, what do I believe myself? And if we don't tell them, they're going to look to other resources. They're going to look to who's at their school, their teachers, their friends, what's on TV. And when I was in middle school and high school, I had a youth pastor. His name was Josh Plant, and he's the best. And he would just let me sit and ask him questions after a lesson. I mean, he was cleaning up, he was trying to go home, but he never once told me to leave. He always sat and listened to my questions. And even if they were stupid questions, like in 6th grade, I remember asking my dad, like, how was the earth created in 6 days and there are dinosaurs? And that just blew my mind. And for 6th graders, it's questions like that. And I want them to be able to ask me all those questions, and their D group leaders all those questions. A few weeks ago, all of our middle schoolers for some reason went way off topic in their D groups, but they were asking really good questions like, what happened to the dinosaurs? Where was all the food in Noah's Ark? And who goes to heaven? Will my dog go to heaven? Will my Jewish friend go to heaven? And usually they're not that talkative, but this one night, everyone was just asking questions. And it was like a huge win for me of just like, wow, this is what youth ministry is supposed to be. I love answering their questions and hearing their questions, because if I can't answer it now, I want to know and go find out for myself and for them.
So, well, you mentioned quotes, and so maybe a little later on you can share, some of those quotes with us. But you talked about doubt. Like, what is the role of doubt in youth ministry, especially with middle school?
Yeah. Middle schoolers are questioning everything. Like I said, they've gone from elementary school to say like, okay, my parents believe this, so I'm going to believe this. And then in middle school, they start asking questions for themselves. And I had a student the other day ask me about doubt. And to be honest, I'm not excited for them, but doubt does play a role in the Christian faith. And if we don't ask good questions, then our faith is probably pretty shallow. And so I like when there's some doubt and they're wrestling with things, because that means they're actually thinking about it instead of just blindly taking everything by faith and just saying like, okay. I want them to ask questions and I want them to think deeply about it. So I'm kind of thankful for it.
So how do you help your leaders? I mean, you're talking about your D groups. We'll ask how you organize that in a little bit. But when you're talking to your leaders, how do you help them to, because they're going to face some questions that kind of blow their mind sometimes.
Yeah.
How do you instruct them and help them to help those students and create that environment that allows for doubt and not just shut it down and say, go read your Bible more?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have little note cards in the D group rooms, and if their D group leader doesn't know how to answer the question, they can write it down and it goes directly to me and my coworker, William. He's the high school director. And so if they don't know the answer, they can gladly either write it down and ask us, or they can bring us into the room and ask the question themselves. And each quarter, our D group leaders come all together and we talk and say like, hey, what are my students struggling with right now? How can we help them? What questions do they have? And this past week we had a meeting and our D group leaders were saying like they need more practical stuff. And so that helps me and William decide what we're going to teach next semester and answer their questions, hopefully.
All right. So you mentioned D groups. And I'm sure, like, tell us a little bit more about your structure. Maybe it's the same for high school and middle school, but we have leaders who are listening and maybe they're starting off with small groups and maybe they're trying to revamp those. So how do you do that?
Yeah. So we do, it's kind of odd, but every other week is 1 week is large group, 1 week is D group, and they flip flop every week. So our teaching week, it'll be dinner, worship, teaching. And then our D group week will be high schoolers are in D group while middle schoolers are eating dinner, and then they switch. We're talking about switching that and having everyone at D group at one time and everyone eating dinner at one time. But right now it's split up by grade and gender. So 6th grade girls, 6th grade boys, 7th grade girls, 7th grade boys until the top. If those get too small, then we merge 2 of them that are similar ages. And each D group has hopefully 2 adults each week, but sometimes that can vary. But yeah. Yeah.
And what does D group stand for?
Discipleship group.
I mean, that was my guess, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
And there's tons of different ways of organizing. That's similar kind of, we had like a small worship time, and then they divided into small groups every week.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the idea of what's some of the benefits of doing the alternating weeks?
Yeah. Well, I remember being in youth group, and that's how we did it. We did like teaching and then D group. But I always felt kind of rushed in the D group when you don't really have very much time. And when all the middle schoolers get into D group, they're like, oh, I have to tell you this thing that just happened today. And you don't get any time to actually talk about Jesus. And so this way, it has been a while since they did the teaching. So sometimes there's a little thing for like the D group leader to read to recap. But they do have like 45 minutes to an hour to actually spend talking about the teaching instead of just like a rushed 10-15 minute thing.
So that spreads out your, I can see a curriculum that was 4 weeks now becomes an 8-week curriculum. Do y'all write your own curriculum, or what do y'all use for that?
Yeah, kind of a mixture. Right now we're teaching on the Apostles' Creed. So we'll do like a line of the Apostles' Creed, and we gather books and stuff from different people. We were reading Dr. Tennett's book on the Apostles' Creed. He's the president of Asbury, for those who don't know. And so we've used that, and then we just gather other books too. But for the most part, we haven't done a curriculum in a little bit.
Well, middle school is great. And you kind of talked about that, how you schedule everything and your format, but this is more for you. So you're in seminary, you are a youth leader, and you are a wife of the family. How do you stay on schedule? How do you make it to the end of the week and still have energy? And, how can you still be a Christian and have faith and do all those things? From a more personal level, what are some of the tips or tricks or things that you, daily rhythms that you use?
Yeah. I'm learning a lot about that right now, actually. This is a year and a half at this church, and I've been learning a lot about that and like how to take boundaries and how to take breaks. But I take my break or my weekend on Friday, Saturday instead of Saturday, Monday, because I don't want to take that Sunday in between. And I think that's helpful for me, is just having 2 days in a row together. I know some people in ministry like to take Monday, but for me, it's helpful to take Friday, Saturday. I try not to do anything student related on Friday, Saturday, but sometimes, there's a football game, there's a play. This weekend I'm going to a play on Friday night. And so, sometimes it's definitely hard, but I think it is important. It's been life-changing for me is to go to a book club, a Bible study, something like that you're not the leader of. I started going to a book club with some of the girls in my church, and we've been going through Live No Lies and by John Mark Comer, and Jesus Through the Eyes of Women by Rebecca McLaughlin. And it is so nice to just sit and not be the youth pastor for a minute, but just be a participant and getting filled in instead of always filling up other people. And so, like, any words of encouragement, definitely do that. Definitely set the hour or two time away to still, because other people are going to not in ministry, they're going to Sunday school, they're going to the main worship service, they might go to small groups, and you're leading all that. That's what you're doing. And so finding that book club or that small group that you're just participating in is changing for me. So.
And that's a challenge that everybody runs into, because you're not only preparing for your stuff, but you're also reading for seminary, working on preaching or classes or whatever.
Yeah.
So great suggestions with the book club. But let's go back to middle school. So you talk about loving middle school ministry. What are some of the unique opportunities that you have with middle schoolers? So, you have high school, elementary, but what are some of the things about middle schoolers that energize you? What are some of the opportunities that may exist that may not exist in other areas, whether it's program or personal or just whatever? Like, why do you love the middle schoolers, and what else would you add?
Yeah. Middle schoolers are very different than high schoolers in the fact that high schoolers, you have to earn their trust. Like, they don't automatically just like, oh, you're a youth leader, I love you. Middle schoolers do that. Middle schoolers are like, oh gosh, you're a young adult, you're awesome, automatically awesome. And that's what scared me about high schoolers a lot in the beginning. But now I just like earning their trust. But middle schoolers, they're just like, wow, you're cool. And so taking that and just not having to work as hard for that trust and that encouragement in them. But middle schoolers, just, you can start running as soon as you meet them, basically. You don't have to take the time and like, are you going to like me? Are we friends? You can just go ahead and start ministering to them and like hang out with them and loving on them. And they're like, yay. So that, I like that about middle schoolers. Just that they're, for the most part, they're excited to be there. They're excited to hang out with their friends. They're excited to learn something. High schoolers, it kind of depends on the student. So.
Something else that you deal with middle school is kind of the differences of where they are in school and differences between them and like the high schoolers. So are there opportunities there or things they're dealing with that present some opportunities?
Yeah. Well, they're definitely like just figuring out how to be teenagers and like soon to be adults. They're like not kids anymore. And so they're trying to figure out who they are, who their friends are, what kind of person they want to be. Am I going to like this thing? And so it's exciting to be a part of that, like making of a person and making of their faith and what they're going to believe and what they're not going to believe in. And high schoolers, they kind of already have that, not set in stone, but they've thought it through more. Middle schoolers are just now making that transition into being a teenager. And I don't know, that's so fun. And like getting to help them figure out who they want to be and what they want to believe in instead of just like, nah, my parents said that, you know?
So I don't know how long ago you were in middle school, but
Yeah.
social media has changed a whole lot of what we do and how we do it. And just as a youth leader, I mean, what are some of the differences and opportunities that you have as far as that? I mean, you have some students who have cell phones, some who may not
Yeah.
yet, maybe just a few, but there's probably a few. How do you help them,
Yeah.
either as a youth leader or just as a small group leader? How can you help students navigate the social media world?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I was in middle school, I had a phone, but it was like a slidey phone, you know, like it had no internet. Um, when they're in middle school, they have iPhones, most of them. I have some students who don't have phones yet, but those are usually like sixth graders, not seventh and eighth. And they have iPhones and they can, I mean, they're on social media. They can see all of Instagram. They can see all of Facebook. The new thing is Be Real. They can see everybody's Be Real picture. And they were all trying to get me to get Be Real the other day. I was like, I don't know. I don't, it's not me. Like if I was in middle school with you, I would do it. But that's just, and all of the apps that they think are fun for like a month and then that's not cool anymore. But getting them at some camps we take their phones. And I think the middle schoolers have a harder time with it than the high schoolers do. Maybe because the high schoolers they've been on youth trips by now, and so they're like, okay, this is just what we do. But middle schoolers have a harder time with it, but I think it's really helpful for them to spend a week without their phone, or spend a few days without their phone, just so they can see like what real life is. Like the whole point of Be Real. Have you heard of it?
I have not yet.
Okay.
It's a new one for
So
me. Um,
it goes off randomly throughout the day, and it's kind of like Snapchat. So like you take a picture of whatever you're doing, but it goes to all your friends, but it goes off at a random time that day. So it could be like 5:30 or like 11 at night. It changes every day. And you're just supposed to take a picture of whatever you're doing. Well, it's just interesting that they like, for me, that would stress me out. Be like, what if I'm not on my phone at that time? But they're always on their phone. So they're always going to be okay with that. But I don't know. I think middle schoolers have a unique opportunity with phones and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all of the apps. But we just have to figure out how for them to use that for good and possibly ministry instead of just so I can show all my friends like how cool I am. So, and I haven't figured all that out yet.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting because when you mentioned Be Real, the thing that popped into my mind was that it's almost like a pushback of that curated Instagram experience, because you get kids' Instagram experience and everything is curated and perfect, and it's whoever they want to present themselves as. And so with something like that, or TikTok has the Now version, which I think is the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, once you take a picture, it's put up there, and so it's what's going on in the moment. And so it's obviously meeting a need. I mean, they wouldn't start it if it didn't feed some sort of hunger for something that could be used. But it's kind of a pushback from that curated, this is who I'm presenting to be, to more of a in the moment, this is who I am. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
I
happening.
think it is. And I hope that is a pushback into like I have to be my best self on the internet. Like, it's just whatever you're doing. And so I hope so.
So, well, let's just switch gears a little bit. One of the challenges that we talk about on this podcast and that youth leaders deal with is finding volunteers. And we had Elle Campbell came on and talked about this with a previous episode. But I can imagine finding volunteers for middle school, because it is its own unique calling. It is a little different. It's kind of like being a pastor. I mean, I was told if you can do anything else besides do this, do it. But if you feel called, then to do this. So I can imagine it's difficult. So how do you find volunteers for these crazy middle school students, both who are competent enough and also who are willing? And what are your best ways to find those volunteers?
Yeah, so I have some good middle school D group leaders right now. But tomorrow I'm actually meeting with our connections director at church to talk about how do I get more? Because I think a lot of adults' views of middle schoolers, either they had a middle schooler at one point and they were like, oh, they're just cranky and lazy. Or they remember being in middle school and they hated it and they don't want to go back. And I hated middle school too. But that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I want them to know that it gets better. I want them to know that they can find Jesus in the hard times, even when, they have a bully at school, even when like their friend who they thought was going to be their best friend for life doesn't like them anymore. Their boyfriend broke up with them after 2 weeks. All those middle school challenges, God is still present in those middle school challenges. And sorry, this is a side note, but one thing that people think about middle schoolers is like, oh, they just complain or like cry when they have a bad hair day. They do, but that's because they're growing into a teenager and they're learning how to handle their minds, their emotions, their body. They're learning how to handle all of that. And so I remember going through that, and I want them to be able to come to me in that and not to diminish their feelings. I remember when I was in middle school and going through things that were hard to me, and adults would just be like, oh, it'll be fine. But it's a big deal to them. And so I want to be there for them to not diminish their feelings, but still bring them back into reality and back to the cross. That was all a side note. But I'm meeting tomorrow with our connections director to try to change people's views on middle schoolers and teenagers. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to tell stories about youth group, to tell stories about whether that's from a student or from me and my coworker William about what we love about our teenagers, or maybe have a middle school or a high school student tell them like why youth ministry is important to them. Because I think a lot of people, when they want to volunteer in the church, they go to missions or children's ministry, which is all great, but teenagers need some love too. And they're not just cranky and lazy. They really are trying to grow into the person that God wants them to be. And they just need some help in that.
I know I have my questions, but
Yes.
your side note is where I want to kind of go a little bit, because you talk about, out of all the questions we've done, I saw you engage and light up when you went to that side note. This is what people don't understand. And so if I was coaching you, I would kind of drill down on that a little bit and make it a point to kind of drill into kind of why do you light up on that? What do parents, church leaders, everybody, what do we get wrong about middle schoolers?
I think mainly just diminishing their emotions. Because some of my students will come up to me and be like, man, I had a really rough day. I got a C on my test and da 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 da. And like, to us, we know it's not going to matter in a week. We know that. But for them, it feels like the world. It feels like their world is crashing in. And I remember being that middle schooler, being really upset about something, and people would just be like, oh, it'll be fine in a week. But that's not how you feel in the moment. And I think they need both that person who is going to sympathize with them and be like, hey, it's going to be okay, and not diminish their emotions, but also that person that's going to point them back into reality lovingly. Just be like, hey, I really understand that you're struggling with these things. But not to let them get stuck in those feelings as well, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know that doing middle school ministry, one of the things, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this or expound on this, but a lot of times it's the first failing of the class that they've always made an A before, or it's the first breakup, and for them it is the end of the world, and they never experienced something like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, you have maybe a family divorce or other tragedies, first death in the family that they've really been close to somebody, and somebody's passed away, a grandmother or something like that, friend's parent, and so they're experiencing a lot of firsts. And one of the other phenomenon I see is middle schoolers who they are best friends in like elementary school. I mean, I could look back and see some of our students who were best friends in middle school and in elementary school, and they grew up together, and all of a sudden they hit middle school and they hit 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and all of a sudden they become different. They grow apart, and you can see it.
Yeah.
And I have parents who are kind of like, what's going on? Because like they were best friends all growing up. And then now they're different, and they choose different sports or do different activities. One goes to volleyball, one goes to doing different sports or dance or whatever. And so what are some observations about that, and some of the ways that friendships change from elementary all the way up through middle school?
Yeah, I think middle school is the time when real friend groups form. I think in elementary school, like, you're friends with kind of everyone. And then in middle school, you start to get cliquey, and you start to like only hang out with the soccer girls or only hang out with the football guys. And so it's interesting. I have 2 girls specifically, and they're best friends at church and not at all at school. Like, they don't hang out at school, they don't talk at school, but at church they're best friends. And I don't really understand why, other than I think in middle school you're just trying so hard to be the cool people that you forget that there are other people. You're just like, I want to be the cool person, so I'm going to hang out with these people. But then church can kind of bring a new aspect into that because it's different people. But it is really interesting because I just noticed this like a week or so ago, that they're like besties at church, but they don't talk. Because I asked last week, I was like, do y'all hang out at school? And they're like, no. Don't have that face about it. Y'all are best friends here. And I had 2 boys that were like that last year as well. They were really good friends at church and not at all at school. And I'm not really sure too much why yet. But it is interesting to watch happen for sure.
All right. So do you have your phone?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do have my phone.
I mean, what are some of your favorite quotes that some of your kids have said?
Let's see. Quote.
And these are Olivia's best quotes from middle schoolers. I mean, don't give us names, but But just give some of your best
Okay.
quotes, like Tonight Show style.
One of my middle schoolers last week said that when I'm in big church, I just think of the Paw Patrol theme song. I don't know why. It came out of nowhere. I don't know. Yeah.
Some worship song somewhere.
Let's see. One of my middle schoolers last year, I asked them if they would rather be blind or deaf. And one of them immediately was like, blind, duh, because some of y'all are not as pretty as me and I do not need to see that. Okay. It was a middle school boy too. It's like, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. What else? I can't go whitewater rafting because my mom doesn't have a belly button and that would be disrespectful. I don't know why.
I mean, wow. But if you are working with middle schoolers, I mean, these are the things you're going to hear. I mean, they don't make sense sometimes, but there's things are going to happen. And you know, for me, it's like it's my favorite group. You talk about getting involved and doing that immediately. I mean, I used to lead worship for camps, and one of the things about the middle school is they would just start off day one and be excited and be just singing all the songs and all the motions and all of everything, and they would run around and just sing whatever. And you go to high school, and it's like crickets for the first 2 days. I mean, it takes about 3 days for them to kind of warm up and be like, "Hey, I'll sing along with you."
Yeah.
But so middle school, they're just out of the gate. They're ready to go.
Yes.
I mean, I appreciate that about them. Well, so we're kind of coming to the backside of this podcast and our time together. Is there a question or something that I haven't mentioned, that I haven't asked that you would want to talk about?
I think I found this really interesting. I learned this like a few years ago, and maybe everyone knows this, but I don't know. Just that the disciples were teenagers. I always thought of them growing up as like 20s, 30s, like the same ages that Jesus was, but they weren't. They were, and I don't know why nobody told me this when I was a teenager, but they were teenagers, and they wanted, in Jewish culture, like, you would follow a rabbi, and then the rabbi would get to say like whether you were good enough or not to become a rabbi. Well, the disciples were rejected by the rabbis, most likely. And they were teenagers, and they weren't the coolest people. They were tax collectors and fishermen, and so they had tried to become like the students of a rabbi, and they weren't good enough. But Jesus took them, and he made them his disciples, and they were teenagers. And I think some students are like, well, I'll be a Christian, or I'll think about those things when I'm an adult. But like, we have examples in the Bible of children and youth and students being very good Christians, and truly using their faith. And the disciples, like, they weren't adults. They didn't have it all figured out, and they still trusted Jesus, and they followed him, and they learned from him. And so, but that's for the students, but that's also for us as youth leaders. Like, I think sometimes we think of our students as, I think we don't give them enough credit. I think we try to dumb things down for them at times, when really they're craving to learn, and they want to think deeper about things. Even if they won't tell you, they do want to think deeper about things sometimes. And they don't want to just be told the same story about the ark, or the same story about Moses, every other week. They're like, we got that, let's move on. And they really do deserve a ton of credit for how deeply they think. So yeah.
So how did you come to that conclusion? I mean, how did you figure that out? I mean, because is instances with certain kids you talk to, or because I agree with you, but I just want to know how you kind of like, because there's some people who have this idea of let's make it as easy as possible, and it's not necessarily the case. And I was talking to Brock Morgan, and he did another interview about the Anxious Teen book that he wrote. But when we talked, he was talking about going deep with students and the need to go deep with students, that they're ready for that. They're ready for more than sometimes we think that they are ready for. So how did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. Well, I remember being in youth group and I was like, I'm ready for something more. Like, I got this. And I didn't mean that to come off cocky. I just wanted something deeper. I wanted to learn more. And so when I became a youth leader, I was like, all right, and some kids aren't as good as like at like biblical literacy and like understanding where things come from. And so I think that's why sometimes we want to dumb things down for them. But hearing students ask questions is like, wow, you are ready for something deeper. You don't, because their questions are really good questions. And I think they are ready for something deeper just by their questions. And sometimes they'll be like, hey, can we talk about this? And like, of course, I would love to talk about that with you. Sorry if you can hear that. That's my dog. There he is. He is.
Just enjoying the day.
But just listening to their questions and listening to them talk in D group, even if they don't know that I'm listening. Just listening to them talk, it's like, wow, y'all are really smart and you are ready for these conversations, even if sometimes we're not sure. And they have to be ready before they go to college to have those deeper conversations, because I don't remember the stat right now, but it's like most of teenagers who went to church growing up, when they hit college, they're gone. And so they have to be prepared for those deep conversations. We started out talking about doubt. Like, we have to prepare them for those conversations so that they're ready by the time they get to college. And I mean, I think there's a stigma on like colleges and the professors who are going to teach you about evolution and stuff like that. But like, I went to a Christian college and it was still easy to just decide not to go to church that day. So it's not just about like the big scary universities. It's any college that you go to. So,
well, it's not having mom or dad to make you get up, or the friends you always went to church with, or whatever. But that did surprise me when I read that. I think it was Kenda Creasy Dean, almost Christian, that talked about, and she talked about that you're not just your just general kids who come, but your leaders, like your intent. Those who are there all the time, serve on your praise team, on your leadership team. It's some of those kids who are deeply ingrained at church, do everything that you ask them to do. It's still like a small percentage of them that walk away. So I think that's interesting. But that starts in elementary school, but continues in middle school. And that's why your small group leaders and volunteers are important. And all the adults who pour into the lives of your students are so important. But one kind of final question as we wrap up is that I am the parent of an 11-year-old who is about to be in youth. And so this is a whole new thing for me. I always look forward to, I knew this day would come when I would have my own student in the youth group. So what is some of the advice that you would give me? And maybe this will help some of the youth leaders be able to advise some of their parents of newly coming junior high students as well.
Okay. I don't know. Ask them questions about their faith. I remember being that age and asking questions to my parents, and it was really fun. Um, and I think most parents are afraid to ask the Christian questions or like the hard Christian questions because they're afraid they're not going to know how to answer. But like, even if you can't answer, you probably know somebody who does, or you can find out the answer. Um, or parents are afraid that like my kid won't think I'm cool anymore. But like, your job isn't supposed to be cool. Like, your job is to lead them to Christ. And it doesn't have to be you being cool. And I mean, I'm not a parent, so I don't understand like that struggle. Um, but I think our youth leaders really want the parents to be doing this as well because it can't only be on the youth leader. Like it has to be the parents and the youth pastor together. Um, but yeah, I think some parents are like afraid to talk about it with their kid, but like don't be. Um, I think your kid will thank you for it later, having those conversations, but not diminishing their questions, but just having real open conversation about Christianity and the questions that they have. Because I think a lot of times kids don't ask their parent questions because they're afraid of their parent diminishing their question. But um, but I mean, have those conversations, ask them questions, let them ask you questions. Um, that's what they need.
You use that word again. So why is diminishing such a theme throughout um, ministry and our conversation? I mean, it's been something that I've noticed
Um,
that you've brought up a lot.
I think I grew up in a church that was like, don't ask questions. Um, other than the one youth leader and my parents, like most of the Sunday school leaders, most of the D group leaders were like, don't ask questions, take it because that's what the Bible says. And like that's great that that is what the Bible says, but nobody ever answered my question. Or um like some I remember somebody asked like about homosexuality and like why is that a sin? The answer was because the Bible says so. But like we have to, as youth leaders, we have to dive deep into their questions because they're asking that for a reason and they know the answer because the Bible says so, which is a great answer. But why does the Bible say that? Um, and not just being quick to say because the Bible says so, or quick to say like you should know this already, but like having an open conversation with them and a loving conversation and explaining why the Bible says what it says instead of just saying because the Bible says so. Yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, it was just something I noticed, and it was kind of a theme
yeah.
throughout our conversation. And I knew there was a reason behind that, something that you tried to
Yes.
do. And I appreciate you diving into that. And I also appreciate you as
Thanks.
someone who works with middle schoolers. And we need more and more youth leaders like you who have that as a calling. I don't know if this is a season in your life or is this is permanent. I don't know if you're going to go on to be a lead pastor or anything, or if this is where you are. But I think it's important that we have youth leaders who are seminary trained and who are pouring into students. Because I'd rather not have to try to get people to come back to church. But I think that people
Yeah.
like you and leaders like you can help us to continue to hold students in and bring them in. So, any books or resources or anything that you have that you would want to share with us, or
Um,
any tips or tricks to share?
I'm reading The Secular Creed by Rebecca McLaughlin, and so far it's really good. So I can't say that I like totally approve of all of it, but I really like it so far. Um, my favorite book of all time, this doesn't have anything to do with youth ministry, but my favorite book of all time is Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, and it's one of his like lesser known ones. Um, and I would encourage anybody to go read it if you're a youth leader or not. Um, and it's a metaphor for the gospel, and it's just beautiful. And so I would encourage anybody to pick it up and read it. Yeah,
I don't know if
it's really
I've
good.
heard.
It's really good.
What
I
is
had to
it called
read it
again?
till we have faces.
Till We Have Faces.
I had to read it in high
Right.
school as just an English project, and I love it. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts for us?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming, and thanks for hanging out with us and sharing with us. Real quickly, I want to let our listeners know. Come connect with us. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Talk Student Men on social media. If you want to go check out studentministryconversations.org, all of our show notes are available, transcripts, links to YouTube, other blog posts, all of those things are available as well. Also, we do have a Patreon account. You can support our ministry, help us as we continue to make this podcast better, reach more people, and equip and empower and encourage more youth leaders. So, well, again, Olivia, thank you. It's been a joy having you on this podcast. Would you take a moment and let us know the ways that if someone has questions or they want to talk to you more, what are the ways that we can connect with you? What are the ways that we can get a hold of you? Where do you hang out online? Or what are those methods of communicating with you?
Yeah. So my email is oliviah@christchurchmemphis.org. My Instagram, if you want to message me, is Olive OLIVE _Hewitt HEWITT _. Yeah.
Well, Olivia, thanks for sharing that with us. And I encourage you to get in touch with Olivia if you have questions. Just want to talk student ministry. I'm sure she'd be glad to talk with you. Listen, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast and for listening to us each and every week. We encourage you. We hope that you are continuing strong in your ministry, and we'll be praying for you as you continue to reach out and make a difference in the lives of the students. So we look forward to seeing you next week on the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. Take care.